There were cruise ships going over to Martha's Vineyard. My idea was, I bet they'd like newspapers. They're sitting around for 5 minutes saying this is great, and then they're getting bored.
You're listening to Financial Grown-Up with me, certified financial planner Bobbi Rebell, author of How to Be a Financial Grown-Up. And you know what? Being a grown-up is really hard, especially when it comes to money. But it's okay. We're going to get there together. I'm going to bring you one money story from a financial grown-up, one lesson, and then my take on how you can make it your own. We got this. Hey friends, that was this episode's financial grown-up, Jordan Goodman, talking about his very first business venture, which he started at the ripe old age of 12. Yes, 12. No surprise, it was in the media business at a local paper in his hometown. Now, since then, he has done just a little bit of work in the business, including 18 years at Money Magazine as the Wall Street correspondent. He is a nationally recognized personal finance expert known as America's Money Answers Man. Jordan Goodman has written more than a dozen best-selling books and hosts his own live radio show, The Money Answers Show, which I have been privileged to be a guest on. Here is Jordan Goodman. Jordan Goodman, financial grown-up and America's Money Answers Man. Welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Bobbi.
So you are a longtime financial journalist. You've got so much going on, including your own radio show, which is on Voice America. And basically the main place where people can find you is moneyanswers.com, where you have pretty much answers to everything, Jordan.
I try. Yeah, I've got videos. I've got links to my Money Answers show, which you were on recently.
Yes. And 14 books.
I've been doing this a long time. I was at Money Magazine for many, many years. And just love to help people. I'm going to hopefully in our short time together give some very practical resources that help them really improve their personal finances.
And your financial expertise goes back to age 12. Tell us your money story, Jordan.
So my financial grown-up story is at age 12, I was delivering the newspaper. In the summers, we were in Hyannis and Cape Cod, and I was delivering the papers from age 9 to 12. And I'd be hanging around the newsroom. And then I started doing a column about youth baseball.
Again, to repeat, you're 12 years old.
I'm 12 years old.
Okay.
I would ride up there with my bike, and I would type these things out on a typewriter and so on. And it was about youth baseball. It was about the Dennis League and the Yarmouth League and the Falmouth League and all these different things. So I used to sell a lot of newspapers, the way they would put it. Anyway, I was hanging around the newsroom, and I happened to notice behind the printing press, there was a ton of newspapers left over. And I said to the pressman, what do you do with these things? He said, well, we just throw them away. I said, well, do you mind if I take some? He said, fine, just take them. Less work for them. So that's my supply. And my demand was there were cruise ships, ferry ships, going over to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket.
Because you grew up in a resort, basically, is what you're saying.
Right in Hyannis, right there. And so my idea was, I bet they'd like newspapers. So I'd go on the boat. They're sitting around for 5 minutes saying this is great, and then they're getting bored. And I come by with a paper, and by the time the ship had left, 70, 80% of the people had bought papers because they're sitting around there doing nothing.
And was there a markup?
Well, I just charged the regular price for the newspaper.
You didn't charge a premium?
Well, this is like in the 1960s, actually. But my cost of goods was zero. So I'd run out of papers. I'd go back to the Cape Cod Times, pick up more papers, and just keep doing it. At the end of the day, my hands were black with ink, but I'd made maybe $300 or something. So,
in one day.
In one day at 50 cents a pop.
Pure profit.
Yeah, pure profit. And the pressmen were happy because they didn't have to go throw out the newspapers. So that was my very beginning of my entrepreneurial / journalistic career.
And have you kept that profit margin with all of your current ventures?
Usually it's hard to do the zero cost of goods, I must say.
All right. So what is your lesson for our listeners?
The lesson is leverage your situation, meaning you as an individual can only do so much. Okay, you only have 24 hours in the day. Supposedly you sleep a little bit. But if you combine forces with other people who have other qualities, contacts, finances, the two of you combined can do a huge amount more than you can ever do individually. And that's often a mistake of entrepreneurs, is they think they can do it all themselves. You can't do it all yourselves, but combining your forces with others can make amazing things happen. And that's what I've done, is combine my ability to get the word out on radio and TV shows and websites and so on with really great financial services that help people. I could just tell them about it. I don't have to actually do those services. And the two of us combined make wonderful things happen.
Hey, Jordan, give us your money tip.
So my money tip is you can do something called mortgage equity optimization as a strategy.
That sounds very grown up.
It sounds very grown up. Literally what it allows you to do is to pay off a 30-year mortgage in about 5 to 7 years on your existing level of income.
Okay, I'm very skeptical. Very skeptical. Go on.
Good. I'm glad you're skeptical. That's good. This is something you'll never hear about from a bank, basically. And there's a website related to it you can find out more, which is truthinequity.com. So I'm just going to give you a very simple idea of how the thing works. So with a traditional mortgage, you make the same payment for 30 years. All the interest is front-end loaded, right? So you're making very, very little progress in the principal for a long, long time. And meanwhile, you keep your income, your paycheck and all that in a checking account sitting there earning zero, right? That's the traditional system. Okay. This is kind of reversing the tables. Instead of making very, very small amount of progress in the principal every month, you're making a lot of progress in the principal every day, literally. And what you do is you use a home equity line of credit, what's called a HELOC, which is a liquid line, kind of a second against your house.
Can you get a HELOC as big as a mortgage?
You don't need it that size. You don't need. You kind of blend the first mortgage with the HELOC, and I'll show you how it works. But you get the HELOC, and then you keep your income, which is normally sitting in the checking account, in the HELOC, pushing down your principal every day. HELOCs are based on what's called average daily balance. How much do I owe today? So say you had a $50,000 HELOC, you paid $50,000 off your first mortgage, you now owe $50 on the HELOC, you put $1,000 in, you now owe $49 instead of $50. So you're paying interest on $49 instead of $50, right? And then you pay your bills out of the HELOC. The best way would actually be once a month by combining all your bills onto one credit card. And every other day during the month, you're making progress on your principal as your balance is going down. All the income you've got from your job, from royalties, from dividends, whatever it may be going in there, constantly pushing your principal down. And literally, you're making accelerating progress on your principal every month, and therefore you pay less interest because you owe less principal. And the end result is you can pay your mortgage off far, far faster. The three things you need, Bobby, to make this work: you've got to have equity in your house. You can't borrow against it if you're underwater. You've got to have a decent credit score, 680 or higher, to be able to qualify for the HELOC.
Okay.
And you have to have positive cash flow. More money coming in than going out during the month. The more positive cash flow you've got, the faster it gets paid off. But I bet the vast majority of your listeners have that.
Yes.
And therefore, they would be able to do this strategy.
And this is also in your book, Master Your Debt. So people can check out Master Your Debt as well. Okay, that is probably the most grown-up money tip I have heard in a very long time. I'm going to check it out more. It's
Excellent.
A little bit intimidating, truth be told, even to me, but it is intriguing and I think worth checking out. Thanks again, Jordan.
Thanks so much, Bobby.
I love Jordan's story. And a lot of what I love is about its simplicity. So here's my take and some things for entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs to think about. Financial grown-up tip number 1. When starting a business, look for the easy. Jordan looked around, saw that there was a resource not being used, namely newspapers. He acquired that resource at zero cost. Then he looked for the easy demand. People bored, waiting around for their cruise. He sold them the newspapers at a profit, an easy profit because the cost was zero. Financial grown-up tip number 2, look for the win-win. In Jordan's case, he was getting the newspapers for free, so that's great on his end, but he was also solving a problem for his bosses at the newspaper. He was quite literally taking out the trash as far as they were concerned. So he was scoring points in his day job while creating a supply chain for what was effectively a side hustle for the preteen Mr. Goodman. That wraps up this episode of Financial Grown Up. Thank you for listening. We are loving all the great feedback. Please subscribe, share, rate, and review on iTunes. That is how this little podcast can hopefully get noticed, and we can keep bringing you this kind of information and hopefully delivering value. It matters, and it is truly appreciated, everyone. Until next time, I'm wishing all of you financial freedom. Financial Grown Up with Bobby Rebell is a BRK Media production.